If an elderly woman escapes a psychiatric ward after 30 years, most people assume she's running from treatment. But what if she's running toward the only place that can prove she was never crazy at all? Welcome to Stories Untold. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from. What city and state are you in right now? Because tonight's story begins with a woman the world erased, and the quiet, terrifying way a signature can steal a life. Her name was Loretta Hale, 74 years old, a former elementary school librarian from Harbor Falls, Maine. The kind of woman who used to press wildflowers between the pages of her favorite books, then forget they were there until years later, like time had left her a small surprise. But in Briarwood State Psychiatric Center, time didn't leave surprises. It left dents. Dents in the linoleum where gurneys scraped the same corners. Dents in the painted cinder block where 1,000 shoulders leaned. Dents in Loretta's bones from decades of medication she didn't need, swallowed under supervision and then, when she could, hidden in the seam of her mattress like contraband. In Briarwood, sanity wasn't a truth, it was a performance. If you looked too calm, they wrote, flat effect, dissociation. If you looked too upset, they wrote, emotional instability, agitation. If you argued, they wrote, paranoia and poor insight. If you stayed quiet, they wrote, withdrawal, catatonic features. So Loretta learned the only role that kept her alive. Invisible, agreeable, harmless. And for a long time, she told herself it didn't matter, because she told herself there was nothing left outside those walls. Until the night she heard two staff members talking in the hallway. She wasn't even trying to eavesdrop. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, folding the same institutional blanket for the 1,000th time, when voices drifted through a cracked door. County's doing audits again, a man's voice said. Old assets, long-term patients. A woman laughed, like it was a joke. Good luck sorting that mess. Some of those people still have property in their names. Like that old lady, Hale, right? The green-eyed one. Loretta's fingers stopped moving. The man continued, yeah, she's been here forever. But her house is still listed under her name, according to the recorder database. Unresolved status. It's weird. Loretta didn't breathe. Because if that was true, then her life hadn't been fully erased. Her home, her real home, might still legally belong to her. And that meant the thing her children did, the thing that took her freedom, it might still be exposed. That night, lying under fluorescent light that never truly went dark, Loretta made herself a promise. Not a wish, not a hope, a promise. If the house is still mine, I'm going back. Now, pause for a second. If you've ever had someone label you as something you're not, if you've ever been misunderstood and then trapped inside that misunderstanding, hit like. Because this story isn't just about escape, it's about reclaiming the truth. 30 years earlier, Loretta could still picture the morning it all happened with cruel clarity, like her mind refused to blur it, because the details were the only defense she had left. February 9, 1995, a Thursday. The coffee tasted burnt. Her husband, Thomas Hale, had been dead for 7 months. Taken fast by a heart attack while sanding trim for the upstairs hallway, he swore he'd finish next weekend. Loretta was still moving through grief like someone walking through knee-deep water. And that's when Darren and Cynthia showed up. Her children. Darren was 39 then, a man with a bright smile that arrived faster than his sincerity. He talked the way salesmen talk. Warm, quick, always steering you where he wanted you to go. Cynthia was 42, a real estate agent, with a crisp haircut and a mind that never stopped calculating what something was worth. They came into the kitchen like they owned it, like grief had turned their mother into a temporary tenant. Mom, Cynthia said, touching Loretta's shoulder. You look tired. I'm fine, Loretta said. Darren poured himself coffee without asking. We're worried about you. Loretta's stomach tightened. Worried about what? Cynthia pulled out a folder, papers inside. You've been forgetting things. The bills, the dates. You left the stove on last week. That's not true. Darren leaned against the counter, casual. You snapped at Mrs. Donnelly too. You accused her of stealing your mail. Loretta blinked. Because she did take my mail. She handed it back and apologized. Cynthia's expression barely changed. That's not what she said. Loretta understood something then, something cold and sharp. They weren't asking, they were building a story. Darren slid a business card across the table. Dr. Malcolm Caldwell. Just talk to him, Darren said. A quick evaluation, to make sure you're okay, for your own protection. Loretta stared at the car, then at her son. Why would I need an evaluation? Cynthia's voice softened, but her eyes didn't. Because Dad's gone, and we need to make sure you're safe. You know how people can take advantage of vulnerable seniors. Loretta almost laughed, because the only people taking advantage of her were standing in her kitchen. But she went anyway, because mothers still want to believe their children are capable of certain things. At Dr. Caldwell's office, Loretta sat in a chair that smelled faintly like antiseptic and old carpet cleaner. She answered his questions calmly. Her name, the date, the president, where she lived. She got them all right. Dr. Caldwell nodded as if that meant nothing. Your children report episodes of confusion and paranoia, he said, pen moving. Do you agree? No. He wrote something down. Do you believe your children are lying? Loretta frowned. I believe they're exaggerating. He wrote more. Do you believe they have motives? Loretta's mouth went dry. Why are you asking me that? His smile was polite and empty. Just gathering context, Loretta leaned forward. This is ridiculous. I came here because my kids asked me to. I'm grieving. That doesn't make me insane. Dr. Caldwell nodded slowly, as if she'd proven something, and then the room shifted. Not physically, something worse. The click of a door opening behind her, two men in uniforms. Not police. Not exactly orderlies. Mrs. Hale, Dr. Caldwell said gently, we're going to get you some help. Loretta stood up, hard hammering. No, I'm leaving. Cynthia appeared in the doorway, arms folded. Darren stood behind her, eyes lowered like he couldn't bear to watch. Loretta looked at her daughter. Cynthia, what is this? Cynthia's voice was steady. It's temporary. Until you stabilize. Loretta stepped toward them, and an orderly blocked her path. You can't do this, Loretta whispered. Darren finally looked up. His face showed something that almost resembled regret. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. It's for the best. And in that moment, Loretta realized the most dangerous lies are the ones spoken in a familiar voice. By noon, she was inside Briarwood. By the end of the week, her home keys were gone. By the end of the month, her name had become a chart number. And by the end of the year, Harbor Falls began telling a story about the elderly woman who lost her mind after her husband died. A story that felt convenient. Back to Briarwood. The escape plan Briarwood didn't look like a movie asylum. It looked like a budget. Cracked paint, buzzing lights, security cameras that didn't fully cover their corners. Tired staff who cut small procedural corners because nothing ever happened. Until it did. Loretta learned routines like prayers, the overnight nurse who took her smoke break at 2:17 a.m., the security guard who checked the East Hall camera feed, but only every 15 minutes, the maintenance closet latch that stuck unless you slammed it. She also learned something else. Confidence is camouflage. People question you when you look unsure. They ignore you when you look like you belong. And after 30 years, Loretta knew how to look like she belonged anywhere inside that building. The hardest part wasn't the route. It was her body. 74 years old. Arthritis in her hands. A knee that swelled when the weather changed. A breath that sometimes caught after climbing a single flight of stairs. But she also had something she didn't have at 44. Patience sharpened into steel. Her chance came on a Friday night in October. Rain tapping the windows like restless fingers. Loretta ate dinner. She smiled at the nurse. She took the medication cup and palmed the pills with the practiced ease of someone who'd been preparing for this longer than anyone could imagine. At 11:52 p.m., she stood. She pulled on the gray coveralls she'd stolen piece by piece. One forgotten in laundry, one taken from an open cart, one cap folded from cloth. She tucked her white hair beneath it. Then she stepped into the corridor, the building hummed. Down the hall, the staff lounge TV murmured with laughter from a sitcom. A door shut, footsteps passed, then faded. Loretta walked steadily, not fast. Fast looked guilty, steady looked employed. She reached the east corridor fire door, a red bar, a sign, alarm will sound. But in Briarwood, alarms were a theory more than a reality. Budget cuts had turned safety into paperwork. Loretta pressed the bar. The door opened, no alarm, only cold air and rain. She stepped outside. For 1 second, she just stood there. Rain wetting her cheeks, and felt something so sharp it almost hurt. The night sky, real darkness, not fluorescent imitation. She moved down the loading dock steps carefully, fingers gripping the rail. Her knee protested, and her lungs burned, but she kept going, one step, then another, until she reached the drainage path that led to the perimeter fence. At the fence, she found the gap she'd been watching for months, where erosion had carved a space beneath the chain link. She lowered herself into mud that smelled like wet earth and dead leaves. Then she crawled. Metal scraped her back. Cold soaked through her sleeves. And when she emerged on the other side, shaking, soaked, filthy, she heard barking. Dogs, not close yet, but searching. Loretta forced herself upright. "Move," she whispered to her own body. "Move." She shuffled toward the service road, then the main highway beyond it. The rain covered her tracks, or maybe the world, for once, decided to look away and give her a chance. At the highway, a bus shelter glowed under a flickering light. Loretta collapsed onto the bench. She counted her breaths. Headlights appeared. A bus hissed to a stop. The door folded open. The driver, a heavy-set man with a tired face and a Patriot's cap, looked her up and down. Mud, gray coveralls, hospital socks inside cheap slippers. He should have asked questions. Instead, he just said, "You getting on or what?" Loretta stepped aboard, hands trembling as she pulled out crumpled bills. Cash she'd hidden for years in a hollowed-out book cover. "Because old library habits never die, I need to get to Harbor Falls." The driver stared, then jerked his chin toward the seats. "Sit. We'll figure it out." Loretta sat near the back, and as the bus pulled away, Briarwood disappeared into the rain like a bad dream. For the first time in 30 years, no one called her a patient. No one watched her swallow. No one wrote her emotions into a diagnosis. She was just an old woman on a bus at midnight, and she cried, silent tears. Not dramatic, just real, because freedom can feel like grief when it arrives late. If you're still with this story, subscribe to Stories Untold right now, because what Loretta finds at her house is where everything turns. Harbor Falls. Harbor Falls. Harbor Falls had changed the way towns change without asking permission. A new coffee shop where the hardware store used to be. A yoga studio in the building that once held the town diner. Bigger roads, brighter signs, but the wind smelled the same, salt and pine and cold water. Loretta got off the bus a few blocks from the old station. The driver didn't even watch her leave. She pulled her cap lower and walked, one street at a time. She passed houses with porch lights on, pumpkins on steps, cars in driveways, people sleeping in warm beds, unaware that a woman who'd been legally buried alive was walking past their fences. When she reached Juniper Lane, her heart slowed, like it was bracing. Because she remembered this street the way you remember a lullaby. And then she saw it. Number 19, her house, or what was left of it. Paint peeled away like sunburn. The porch sagged. Windows were boarded or shattered. The yard was a wilderness of waist-high weeds and vines. It looked less like a home and more like a warning. Loretta stood at the curb, rain misting her face, and felt two things collide inside her. Memory. Thomas laughing on that porch, coffee in hand. Reality. Silence. Rot. Abandonment. A porch light clicked on next door. Loretta flinched. Someone's silhouette moved behind a curtain. If a neighbor saw her and called the police, an elderly woman matching the description of an escaped psychiatric patient, this would end before it truly began. So Loretta moved. She slipped through the overgrowth along the side of the house, toward the old kitchen entrance. Thomas used to complain about that door. "Sticks in wet weather," he'd say, shoulder-checking it with a grin. "Like the house wants to keep us in." Loretta put her hand on the knob. It turned. The door gave with a groan. Air rolled out, stale, damp, mold sour. Loretta stepped inside. Her shoes crunched on debris. Leaves had blown in, died on the floor. Cabinet doors hung open like broken jaws. A dark stain climbed one wall where water had been dripping for years. But even through the destruction, she recognized shapes. The corner where the table used to be. The spot on the wall where Thomas had marked their kids' heights in pencil. The doorway to the living room where Christmas lights once glowed. She moved forward, slow, careful. The living room made her stop. Part of the ceiling had collapsed. Rain had ruined the floorboards. Everything soft, carpet, drapes, furniture, was gone. But the built-in shelves were still there. Thomas built those shelves with his own hands the year Darren left for college. Loretta walked toward them like she was afraid they might vanish. Her fingers touched the wood. And then she remembered something Thomas used to say when he was working late. sanding and fitting pieces like a puzzle. A house should have secrets, he'd murmured once, smiling. Not bad ones. Just safe ones. Loretta's breath caught. Because Thomas did have secrets. Little compartments, hidden panels. A place for documents when storms came, or when people came. Loretta knelt by the shelves, ignoring the ache in her knees. She ran her hand along the backing, feeling for irregularities. There, a section that sounded different when tapped. Hollow. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her throat. She pressed her fingers against the panel. It didn't move. She tried again. Nothing. Loretta swallowed. Come on, she whispered. Then she noticed it. 3 small brass tacks in a line, half hidden by grime. A pattern. Thomas loved patterns. Loretta pressed the first tack, then the second, then the third. A click. The panel shifted just slightly. Loretta pulled. The wood swung inward, and a pocket of darkness opened behind it. Inside sat a metal box. Dull with age but intact, wrapped in plastic that crackled when she touched it. Loretta's hand shook, because a box like that didn't hold nothing. It held the reason, it held the truth. And behind her, a floorboard creaked. Not her knee, not the settling house. A deliberate sound, like weight shifting, like someone else was standing in the ruined living room with her. Loretta froze, one hand on the metal box, her breath trapped. In the silence, she heard it again. A faint inhale, too close, right behind. If this has you on the edge of your seat, comment right now. Where are you watching from? And do you think Loretta should turn around? Because in next part, she's going to find out whether the house is merely abandoned, or whether someone has been waiting for her to come back. If you're still watching Stories Untold, then subscribe to never miss stories that amaze and comment right now. Where are you watching from? Loretta didn't turn around at first, because turning around meant confirming what her body already knew. She wasn't alone. Her hand stayed on the metal box inside the secret compartment. Fingers curled so tight her knuckles ached. She held her breath and listened. Another sound, not footsteps, a soft scrape like rubber on damp wood. Then a whisper so close it raised the hairs at the back of her neck. Don't move. Loretta's throat went dry. The words didn't sound cruel, just tense, controlled, like someone trying not to panic. Slowly, Loretta lifted both hands, palms open, and let the metal box sit where it was. I'm not here to hurt anyone, she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. This is my house. A flashlight beam snapped on behind her, slicing across the ruined living room. The light caught dust in the air, drifting like ash. Your house, the voice said again, skeptical. Loretta turned just enough to see him. A man in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, stocky build, a gray beard, a weatherproof jacket with a hood pulled back, rain droplets still clinging to the fabric. In his left hand was the flashlight. In his right, something metal, a crowbar. His eyes flicked from Loretta's hospital socks to her coveralls, to the mud on her sleeves, and then to the open panel in the bookshelf. Who are you? Loretta asked. The man swallowed, his grip tightening on the crowbar like he didn't quite trust his own hands. Name's Ben Rourke, he said. He hesitated. I'm supposed to be here. Loretta's heart pounded. Supposed to be here for who? Ben's jaw worked like he regretted answering. The property management company. They called me this afternoon, said the place had been breached. Asked me to check it, board it up, make sure nobody was inside. Loretta stared. Breached. Ben's flashlight dipped to the open kitchen door. That door wasn't open yesterday. Loretta's stomach tightened. If someone had already flagged the house, if a company had already been hired, then Cynthia and Darren hadn't just abandoned this property. They'd been watching it, waiting for the right moment to finally claim it. Loretta kept her hands visible and took one slow step away from the shelf. Ben flinched and raised the crowbar slightly. Loretta stopped. Ben, listen to me. I know how I look, but I didn't break into anything. I used to live here. I'm Loretta Hale. Ben's eyebrows lifted. Loretta saw the moment his brain searched memory, the way locals do when a name rings a bell from a long time ago. And then his face changed. Not recognition exactly, more like disturbance. Loretta Hale, he repeated quietly. The woman who lost her mind after her husband died? Loretta finished bitterly. Ben didn't answer. He didn't need to. Loretta pointed to the secret compartment. My husband built that shelf, she said. Thomas Hale. He hid things in this house. Important things. Ben's flashlight flicked toward the hidden space again. Loretta continued, voice low. I'm not supposed to be out. People are looking for me. But if what's in there is what I think it is, I can prove what they did to me. Ben stared at her for a long time. Outside, rain tapped the broken windows. The silence stretched so tight Loretta could feel it. Finally, Ben lowered the crowbar. Okay, he said, but the word came out like surrender. Okay, show me. Loretta turned back to the shelf and reached inside with careful reverence. Like she was touching a grave marker. She pulled out the metal box first, heavier than she expected, cold through the plastic wrap. Ben stepped forward instinctively to help, then stopped himself, as if touching the box might pull him into whatever story this was. Loretta set it on a stable patch of floor between broken plaster and warped boards. Then she reached back into the hidden compartment again. There was more, a manila envelope also wrapped in plastic, a small cassette tape case, and beneath them, tucked deeper, an old cloth pouch that felt like it held coins or keys. Loretta's hands shook as she gathered everything. Ben crouched beside her, flashlight trained on the items like an investigator at a crime scene. What is all that? He asked. Loretta swallowed. My life. Or what's left of it. She peeled the plastic off the envelope first. The crackle sounded too loud in the ruined house. Inside were papers. Official-looking documents, yellowed with age but still legible in the flashlight beam. Ben leaned closer. Loretta's eyes landed on the first page and a pain like electricity surged through her chest. The deed, not a photocopy, not a county printout, the original. Thomas's handwriting on the margins, his signature the seal, her name, Loretta Ann Hale. Ben let out a small breath. That's a deed. Loretta nodded. He kept it hidden, he always said. Her voice cracked, and she forced it back together. He always said people lie easiest when papers are missing. Ben looked up at her. So your kids, they stole my house, Loretta said, and they stole my freedom to do it. Ben went still. You're saying they committed you for the property. Loretta didn't answer with words. She reached deeper into the envelope, fingers brushing another sheet. Letterhead. A doctor's name. Her mouth went dry as she pulled it free and held it under the light. Dr. Malcolm Caldwell, dated days before her evaluation, addressed to. Loretta's vision blurred and she blinked hard. Darren Hale. Ben's voice dropped. What does it say? Loretta read it once silently and the room tilted. Then she read it again, out loud, because part of her needed another human being to hear it so it became real in the world, not just in her memory. Her voice shook as the words spilled into the ruined air. A summary of documentation provided by Darren. A line about symptoms that do not constitute sufficient grounds under standard criteria. And then the line that made Ben's face strain of color. Given the financial consideration we discussed, I am prepared to conduct an evaluation that supports your petition. Loretta stopped reading. Her hands were trembling so hard the paper rustled like leaves. Ben stared at the letter as if it might burn him. Holy, he whispered, this is a bribe. Loretta nodded. That's 30 years of my life. Ben looked at her, and for the first time his expression wasn't skeptical. It was ashamed. Like he'd lived in the same town where this happened and never truly questioned the story. Loretta's throat tightened. I tried to tell people, for years. But who listens to a crazy woman? Ben's eyes flicked toward the window, then back to Loretta. Listen, he said quickly. If you have that letter, you can't stay here. Not even an hour. Whoever hired the property company, whoever wants this house. If they find you here with that proof, Loretta didn't need him to finish. Because in the distance, faint but real, she heard another sound beneath the rain. A car engine. Then another. 2 sets of headlights slid across the overgrown front yard like searching eyes. Ben stiffened. That's not good. Loretta's pulse spiked. They found me, she whispered. Ben grabbed her arm. Not rough, but urgent. Back door. No. Loretta shoved the deed and the letter back into the envelope with shaking hands, then stuffed the cassette and cloth pouch into her coveralls. She wrapped the metal box under one arm, fighting the weight. Ben led her through the hallway, boots crunching debris. The house groaned around them like it didn't want to be disturbed. At the kitchen, Ben paused and killed the flashlight. They stood in darkness, listening. A door slammed outside. Voices, muffled by rain, carried faintly through the broken kitchen window. Check the back. Loretta felt her blood turn cold. Ben's whisper was barely audible. That's not cops. Cops don't talk like that. Loretta's mouth went dry. Then who is it? Ben didn't answer. He lifted the kitchen window frame with a soft scrape, already loose from years of rot, and motioned Loretta forward. Go, he mouthed. Loretta climbed out, metal box first, then her body. The fall to the ground was short but brutal on her knee. She bit down on a gasp. Ben followed, landing lighter, then yanked a tarp off something nearby. A truck. Old but functional. Ben shoved open the passenger door. Get in, Loretta climbed in, clutching the box like a lifeline. Ben ran around to the driver's seat, jammed the key, and the engine roared to life too loud in the quiet neighborhood. Headlights swung toward them. Someone shouted. Ben hit reverse hard, tires spinning mud, then slammed into drive and shot down the side street, with the house disappearing behind rain and darkness. Loretta turned in the seat, watching the shadows of men move across her yard like a memory she couldn't escape. Ben swore under his breath. They were waiting. Loretta's hand shook so badly she could barely hold the box. Outside the windshield, Harbor Falls blurred in wet streaks and streetlights. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ben said quietly, "You're not going back there tonight." Loretta's voice came out thin. "I don't have anywhere else." Ben's jaw tightened. "Yeah, you do. You have me. Until we figure out who to trust." Loretta stared at him, stunned by the words. Trust. It felt like a language she'd forgotten. Ben drove toward the edge of town, away from the neat neighborhoods and toward the old industrial strip, where nobody asked questions at 3 a.m. He pulled into a parking lot beside a closed diner with a flickering sign. "We're going inside," he said. "My cousin runs the place. She opens early for fishermen. You need heat." Loretta's body was shivering now, adrenaline wearing off and cold moving in. Ben unlocked a side door, and the smell of grease, coffee, and old wood hit Loretta like a different kind of time machine. A woman in her 40s stood behind the counter, hair tied up, wiping mugs. She looked up sharply. Ben held up a hand. "Tara, don't freak out." Her eyes moved to Loretta, and her mouth fell slightly open. "Ben, who is that?" Ben didn't hesitate. "Loretta Hale." The mug in Tara's hand froze mid-wipe. Tara's voice dropped to a whisper. "That Loretta Hale?" Loretta wanted to disappear. Ben stepped closer to Tara and said something too low to hear, then slid the envelope onto the counter like evidence. Tara read the top sheet, eyes scanning, widening. Then she looked back at Loretta. And something shifted in her face, something like belief, then anger. "My mom used to talk about you," Tara said quietly. "She said the whole thing felt wrong. But people don't like to fight families. They don't like to get involved." Loretta's throat tightened. "I got involved," she said bitterly. "It didn't matter." Tara's gaze hardened. "It matters now." She turned and pointed to a booth near the back. "Sit. I'll get you coffee and a towel, and you're going to tell me exactly what happened." Loretta sat, the vinyl seat squeaking under her. The booth felt impossibly normal. Ben slid in across from her, rubbing his hands like he couldn't get warm either. Tara returned with a mug, a plate of toast, and a stack of towels. Loretta stared at the food like it was a foreign object. Ben leaned forward. "You need to eat. You're going to crash." Loretta's hands shook as she wrapped a towel around her shoulders. The warmth made her eyes sting. She took a sip of coffee. Too hot, too strong, perfect. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she looked at Ben and Tara and said, "They locked me away 30 years for my house." Tara's jaw clenched. "Who?" Loretta swallowed. "Darren, Cynthia, and a doctor named Caldwell." Ben exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the table. "The doctor still practicing?" Loretta shook her head. I don't know anything anymore." Tara leaned in. "Then we start with what you do know." Loretta opened the envelope again, hands steadier now that she wasn't alone. She showed them the deed, the bribe letter, and then she pulled out the cassette tape case. Ben tapped it. "What's that?" Loretta hesitated. "Thomas used to record things sometimes. He said it helped him remember." I don't know what's on it. I haven't listened." Tara's eyes flicked toward the back room. "We've got an old player somewhere." Ben looked at Loretta. "You sure you want to hear right now?" Loretta stared at the cassette like it could bite her. She thought of the headlights in her yard, the men's voices, the speed with which someone had tried to grab the house the moment she returned. Whatever was on that tape, it wasn't just history. It was motive. Loretta nodded once. "Play it." Tara disappeared into the back and returned with a dusty cassette player like a relic. She set it on the table and clicked it on. The tape word, static. And then a voice, deep, steady, familiar in a way that made Loretta's chest ache. Thomas, if you're hearing this, the voice said, it means I'm not here to say it to your face, Lori. And that means something's gone wrong. Loretta covered her mouth with her hand. Ben and Tara stayed perfectly still. Thomas continued, voice calm but edged with tension. I found a letter today. In the study. Dropped behind the desk. I don't think Darren meant to leave it here, a pause. I don't know exactly what he's planning, but I know it involves Dr. Caldwell. And money. And you. Loretta's eyes filled. The recording continued with a sound, paper rustling. And then Thomas read a portion of the letter aloud. Not all of it. Enough. The same lines about financial consideration. The same cold phrasing that turned Loretta's life into a transaction. Then Thomas spoke again, lower. I've been watching Cynthia too. She's been taking calls outside. Whispering, talking about timing and clean paperwork. I don't think they realize I hear them. A long silence on the tape. Then Thomas's voice cracked, just slightly. I keep thinking maybe I'm wrong. Maybe grief makes me suspicious. But I'm not wrong. I know my own children. I can feel it in the room when they look at you. Loretta squeezed her eyes shut. On the tape, Thomas inhaled. So here's what I'm doing. I'm putting the deed where only you will find it. I'm putting the cash where only you will reach it. And I'm leaving you proof. Because a man can't stop the people he loves from making choices. But he can leave behind a way to fight back. The tape clicked as it reached the end of the side. Tara's eyes were wet. Ben stared at Loretta like she was something fragile and furious at the same time. Loretta's hands trembled in her lap. He knew, she whispered. He knew, and he tried to protect me. Tara's voice was fierce. Then we finished what he started. Ben leaned forward. We need to get this to someone official. Not just local cops, Loretta swallowed. They won't believe me. I escaped a psychiatric hospital. Tara pointed at the letter. That's why you're not walking in alone. And you're not walking in as a patient. You're walking in as a victim with evidence. Ben nodded. And we do it smart. Tara reached under the counter and pulled out a notepad. First, do you have ID? Loretta's shoulders sank. No. Everything was taken. Ben's eyes narrowed. Then we get you a lawyer, someone who understands wrongful commitment, guardianship abuse. Tara flipped through her phone contacts. There's a legal aid clinic in Portland. And there's also, wait. She looked up at Loretta. You used to work at the library, right? Loretta nodded faintly. Tara's eyes sharpened. Then there will be people who remember you, people who can vouch for who you are. Loretta's heart pounded. My face will be on alerts. If the hospital notified police, Ben cut in. Then we move fast before the town hears about it. He looked at Tara. We need a safe place for her tonight. Tara hesitated, then said, My brother's apartment above the diner. He's out on a boat until Monday. It's empty. Loretta blinked. That's too much. Tara leaned in. What was too much was 30 years. This is nothing. Loretta didn't trust herself to speak. So here's the question for you watching right now. If you found proof that your own family paid to erase you, what would you do next? Comment where you're watching from, and whether you'd go straight to the police, or straight to the people who did it, because Loretta didn't get to decide in peace. At 6:12 a.m., Tara's diner door chimed. A man walked in wearing a rain-dark coat. Not a fisherman, not a regular. His eyes scanned the room with a professional calm that made Loretta's stomach drop. Then his gaze locked on her, and he smiled, like he'd found something that belonged to him. Ben stood up slowly. Can I help you? The man's smile widened just a fraction. He reached into his coat and flashed a badge, too quick to read clearly. Morning, he said, looking for a missing person. Loretta's blood turned to ice. Ben's voice stayed steady. We're closed. The man ignored him, walking closer. His eyes never left Loretta. Loretta Hale, he said, like tasting the name. You've caused a lot of trouble. Loretta's hands clenched under the table. Tara stepped forward. Who are you? The man's smile vanished. Tell her to come with me, he said to Ben, like Loretta wasn't even there. And this can stay easy. Ben's jaw tightened. Or what? The man's eyes flicked to the envelope on the table. You don't want to make this loud, he said softly. Hospitals are already calling. Cops too. And once the police arrive, An escaped psychiatric patient isn't going to look like a victim. She's going to look like a threat. Loretta realized then this man wasn't here to help. He was here to control the story before Loretta could tell it. Ben moved in front of Loretta slightly, blocking the man's view. "No," Ben said, "she's not going anywhere." The man tilted his head. And with chilling calm, he said, "Then I call Cynthia." Loretta's breath stopped, because hearing her daughter's name spoken by a stranger like a command made one thing perfectly clear. Cynthia hadn't just abandoned the house, she'd built a net around it, and Loretta had walked right into the center. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because part 3 is where Loretta's fight turns into a war for the truth, and not everyone makes it out clean. Ben's hand slipped into his jacket pocket. Tara reached for the phone behind the counter. And Loretta held Thomas's letter tighter, feeling the paper tremble with her pulse, because she understood the next move would decide whether she got her life back or disappeared for good, this time permanently. Ben didn't move. He stood between Loretta and the man with the too fast badge flash, shoulders squared like a door you couldn't push through. Tara's hand hovered near the phone behind the counter, but she didn't grab it yet, because she understood the trap. Call the wrong number, say the wrong thing, and the story becomes escaped psychiatric patient causing a disturbance. The man smiled like he could smell their hesitation. "Cynthia," he repeated, soft and confident. "She's been very worried." Loretta's stomach clenched so hard it felt like a cramp. Ben's voice stayed even. "If you're law enforcement, state your name and department." The man's smile thinned. "You don't get to interrogate me." Tara took one step closer. "Actually, in my business, people identify themselves or they don't get served." The man's gaze flicked to Tara, then back to Loretta. He stepped toward the booth again. "That file on the table," he said calmly. "Hand it over. Then we can be civil." Loretta's hands closed around the envelope until the paper edges bent. "No," she said. It came out steadier than she expected, like her voice had been hiding in her bones, waiting for a moment worth using it. The man stopped. For the first time, irritation flashed across his face. "Loretta," he said, as if they were friends, "you've been through a lot. You're confused. You're scared. Let's not make decisions you'll regret." Loretta stared at him, and the truth clicked into place with a clean, terrifying clarity. This was not about helping her. This was about controlling what she could prove. Ben leaned down slightly, his mouth close to Loretta's ear. "Keep your hands on the envelope," he whispered. "Don't let him touch it." Loretta nodded once. Tara's voice cut through. "I'm calling the police." The man's head snapped toward her. "Don't." Tara's eyes hardened. "That's not how this works. You walk into my diner, threaten my customers, and tell me what to do." The man took a slow breath as if restraining himself. "Fine," he said. "Call them." Then he looked at Loretta again, and his voice turned colder. "But when they show up, you'll be in cuffs before you finish your first sentence." Loretta's mouth went dry. Ben stood taller. "Not if she is counsel." The man tilted his head. "Counsel? For an escaped mental patient?" Tara finally grabbed the phone, but instead of dialing 911, she tapped a contact and raised it to her ear. "Answer," she muttered under her breath, eyes locked on the stranger. Ben glanced at Tara, surprised. Tara covered the mouthpiece and whispered, "My cousin's fiancé is an attorney. He picks up." The man's eyes narrowed, like he'd realized they weren't as isolated as he'd hoped. Loretta felt the cassette in her pocket like a heartbeat. A weapon, not a gun. Something more dangerous. Truth. Tara spoke into the phone quickly, controlled. "Nate, it's Tara. I need you here right now. It's an emergency. I need a lawyer, not advice." A pause. Tara's expression tightened. "Yes." "And bring your bar card." "I'm not kidding." She hung up. The man took a small step backward, recalculating. Ben's voice was low and sharp. "Who are you?" The man's smile returned. "Thin, practiced. Just someone hired to solve problems," he said. Then he glanced at the window, where the sky had gone from black to bruised gray. "I'll give you 10 minutes, he said to Loretta. "Then I make calls." He turned and walked out as if he owned the morning. The diner door chimed behind him, and only then did Loretta realize she'd been holding her breath. She exhaled, shaky. Tara grabbed a clean towel and shoved it into Loretta's hands. "Wipe your face. Sit up straight." Loretta blinked. "Why?" Tara leaned in, voice fierce. "Because they want you to look unstable." You don't give them that? Not for 1 second. Ben pointed at the envelope. That letter. Keep it on you. Not on the table. Loretta slid the papers into the inside pocket of her coveralls like they were a passport. Tara looked at Ben. If he's not a cop, who is he? Ben's jaw clenched. Could be a private investigator, could be someone Caldwell used, or Loretta finished the thought, or someone my daughter paid. The word daughter tasted bitter, like something once sweet that had rotted. Tara grabbed the cassette player and shoved it toward Loretta. Is there more on that tape? Loretta swallowed. We only heard one side. Ben looked toward the door. Then we don't have time to cry about it. We flip it. Loretta's fingers trembled as she ejected the cassette, turned it over, and clicked it back in. The tape word, static. Then Thomas again, closer this time like he'd recorded it late at night in the study, the rest of the house asleep. If anything happens, Thomas said, it won't be an accident. Loretta's heart kicked hard. Ben and Tara froze. Thomas continued, voice steady but edged. I confronted Darren today. I asked him straight out what he was doing. He denied it, smiled while denying it. But then he said something that told me everything. A pause. He said, Dad, you're not thinking big picture. It's just paperwork. Loretta's eyes burned. Thomas inhaled slowly. I'm putting this on record. Loretta is not a danger to herself or anyone else. She is grieving. She is heartbroken. But she is lucid. She is sane. Loretta pressed a fist to her mouth. Then Thomas's voice dropped. And I'm also putting this on record. Dr. Caldwell is complicit. He's taking money. I saw the envelope when Darren left his jacket on the chair. Cash. I don't know how much, but I know what it's for. Ben's eyes widened. Thomas spoke again, quieter. If you find this, Lori. I'm sorry. I should have stopped it sooner. I should have done more than hide papers in a wall. A long silence. Then, one more thing. There's a key in the pouch. It's for the floor safe in the basement storage cabinet. I never told you because I didn't want to burden you with my worries. Loretta's breath hitched. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the cloth pouch she'd found in the shelf. Her fingers untied it. Inside was a small brass key and a few old coins. Ben leaned forward. You have a safe. Loretta stared at the key like it was a door handle back into her own life. I didn't know, she whispered. Tara's voice sharpened. That safe could have more proof or more money, or both. Ben checked his watch. We can't go back to the house. Not with those men watching it. Loretta's jaw clenched. For 30 years, her life had been dictated by locked doors. Now, the first thing she'd found that might truly free her, another locked door, was sitting miles away, guarded by people who wanted her silent. Tara grabbed her phone again. Okay, new plan. We don't play defense, we go public. Ben frowned. Public how? Tara opened her camera app, then hesitated. If I go live, and we say her name, the hospital might come faster. Loretta looked up. Let them. Ben stared. Loretta's voice was quiet but unbreakable. I spent 30 years trying to be invisible. It didn't save me. It just made me easier to bury. Tara nodded slowly, as if something clicked in her too. Then she hit live. The screen reflected in the diner window. Tara's face pale and determined, and Loretta beside her wrapped in a towel, eyes bright with exhaustion. Good morning, Tara said into the camera. This is Tara Raines in Harbor Falls. If anyone sees this, share it, please. There's an elderly woman here who needs help, and she is evidence that she was wrongfully committed. Loretta felt her throat tighten. Tara turned the camera slightly. What's your name? Loretta looked straight into the lens. Loretta Hale, she said. The name landed in the world like a thrown stone. And then Tara did the one thing Loretta never thought anyone would do for her. Tara said clearly, Loretta is not dangerous. Loretta is not confused. Loretta has documents that show a doctor took money to help her children commit her. Ben's eyes darted to the diner door as if expecting it to explode open. Loretta's hands shook, but she kept her face steady. Tara lowered the phone and whispered, Now if anyone tries to drag you out, the whole internet watches. Ben exhaled slowly. That's risky. Tara's voice was flat. So was leaving her in there for 30 years. A car pulled into the lot, then another. Ben went rigid. That's them. Loretta's pulse spiked. Tara lifted the phone again, the camera pointed at the door. The diner chimed. A man entered, tall, clean-cut, wearing a raincoat and holding a leather folder. He looked around quickly, then locked eyes with Tara. Nate, Tara breathed. Ben blinked. That's the lawyer. Nate crossed the diner fast. Who's threatening you? He asked. Tara pointed at the window. Outside, the badge man was back, standing near his car like a patient predator, phone at his ear. Nate's jaw tightened. Okay. First, nobody speaks to him. Second, Loretta, do you have any paper proof on you? Loretta pulled the Caldwell letter from her pocket with trembling hands. Nate scanned it, and his expression changed from concern to fury. This is catastrophic, he said softly. Ben leaned in. Meaning? Nate looked up. Meaning this isn't just elder abuse, this is a crime, fraud, potentially conspiracy. And if she was held without due process, this blows the doors up. Loretta's voice came out raw. Can you get me out of this? I'm still technically. Nate cut her off. Don't say anything else about your status out loud. He turned to Tara. Do you still have that live stream running? Tara nodded. Nate took a breath. Good. Then he looked at Loretta again, his voice firm. Loretta Hale, you are going to do exactly what I say. We're going to request an emergency hearing. We're going to call the state agency that oversees facilities. And we're going to involve the Attorney General's office. Ben stared. Today, Nate's eyes were hard. Now outside, the badge man stepped closer to the diner. Nate stood and walked to the door, opening it just enough to speak without stepping outside. Sir, Nate called calmly. I'm counsel for Ms. Hale. Do not approach. Any attempt to detain or intimidate her will be documented and treated as witness tampering. The badge man smiled. Counsel? Cute. Nate's voice didn't change. Identify yourself. The man's smile faded. She belongs to Briarwood. Nate leaned slightly forward. No human being belongs to a facility. If you're law enforcement, you'll come back with marked units and a supervisor. If you're not, you'll leave. The man stared at Nate for a long moment. Then his eyes flicked, briefly, to Tara's phone still filming. He saw the red live mark, and something in him calculated again. He took a step back, hands raised like he was the reasonable one. Fine, he said, but you're delaying the inevitable. He walked away, got into his car, and drove off. Ben released a breath like he'd been punched and finally stopped bracing. Loretta's whole body shook. Nate turned back inside. Okay, we move. Tara, can you drive? Ben, you come too. Loretta blinked. Where? Nate's answer was immediate. Not the police station, not first. We go straight to the courthouse intake and file. Then we call the oversight hotline with this letter in hand. Loretta clutched the envelope like it was the only thing keeping her upright. And for the first time in decades, she didn't feel like a patient being transported. The courthouse smelled like paper and disinfectant. Different from Briarwood, but close enough to make Loretta's stomach twist. Nate kept Loretta between him and the hallway traffic like a shield. Tara stayed a step behind, phone in hand, still recording. Ben walked to Loretta's other side, silent but steady, like if she drifted, he'd catch her. At the clerk's window, Nate spoke in the language of systems. Emergency petition, he said, crisp. Wrongful commitment, immediate review. Evidence of physician bribery, elder financial exploitation. The clerk's eyes widened slightly at the phrase, physician bribery. Loretta watched the clerk's gaze flick to her face, then to her damp coveralls, then back to Nate. Then the clerk did something Loretta hadn't seen in 30 years. She treated Loretta like a person. Take a seat. The clerk said, I'm getting the judge's administrator. Loretta sat on a wooden bench. Her knee throbbed. Her hands ached. But inside her something held. A quiet, relentless force. Minutes later, a woman in a blazer approached with a badge and a serious face. I'm Miss Klein, she said. Judge Rowe will see you. Loretta's breath caught. A judge. A real one. Not a doctor with a pen that turned truth into diagnosis. They entered a small hearing room. Judge Rowe. A woman in her 60s looked down from the bench, eyes sharp. Nate placed the Caldwell letter on the table like a loaded object. Your Honor, he said, this is a bribe solicitation letter from the evaluating psychiatrist to Ms. Hale's son, dated prior to Ms. Hale's involuntary admission. Judge Rowe read it. The room went very still. Loretta watched the judge's face change, piece by piece, like a door unlocking. This is extraordinary, Judge Rowe said. Loretta's voice shook. I tried to tell people. Judge Rowe looked at her directly. Ms. Hale, I'm listening now. Loretta's eyes filled. Tara's phone held steady, recording capturing the sentence Loretta never thought she'd hear. Then the courthouse door opened behind them. A uniformed deputy stepped in and whispered to Miss Klein. Miss Klein's face tightened. She leaned in and whispered to Nate. Nate's jaw clenched. Loretta's stomach dropped. Ben's voice was low. What? Nate looked at Loretta. Briarwood filed an emergency pickup order. Loretta's blood turned cold. Judge Rowe's eyes snapped up. On what grounds? Miss Klein spoke carefully. They're claiming she's a danger due to escape and alleged instability. Loretta's hands clenched. The lie was trying to reattach itself. Judge Rowe's gaze returned to the letter, then to Loretta. And Judge Rowe said the words that changed everything. Denied. Not without independent evaluation and oversight presence. Loretta blinked. What? Judge Rowe's voice sharpened. This court will not rubber stamp an order from a facility when credible evidence of bribery and fraud is sitting on my desk. Loretta's breath came out in a broken sound that was half sob, half laugh. Ben closed his eyes briefly like he'd been holding a prayer. Tara whispered, "Oh my God." Judge Rowe leaned forward. Ms. Hale, you are not leaving this courtroom with anyone except your attorney, unless law enforcement presents a lawful supervised order with proper review. And based on what I'm seeing, this case is being referred to the Attorney General today. Loretta's shoulders shook. 30 years. And it took one judge saying I'm listening now to make the world feel real again. By afternoon, Harbor Falls was buzzing, not with gossip, with shock, with outrage, because Tara's live stream had spread. People who remembered Loretta from the library commented her name like a prayer. Teachers, old neighbors, former students. They didn't remember a crazy woman. They remembered a gentle librarian who helped kids find books they loved. And that public memory, the one Darren and Cynthia tried to erase, came rushing back like a ton. Nate moved fast. He filed protective orders. He contacted the state oversight office. He requested security. He told Loretta one sentence she repeated in her head every time fear crept up. Truth moves slower than lies, but it moves. Very. That evening, in a protected room at a local advocacy center, Loretta sat wrapped in a blanket, the envelope on her lap. Ben stood by the window, watching cars pass. Tara sat beside Loretta, phone buzzing nonstop with messages. Your comment section is insane, Tara said softly. People are furious. Loretta stared at the bribe letter. Furious. She'd been furious for decades. But now something else was growing beside it. Relief. Because she wasn't the only one seeing clearly anymore. Nate entered, face tired but focused. They found Caldwell, he said. Loretta's head snapped up. Where? Nate exhaled. Not at his office. Loretta's stomach tightened. He ran. Nate nodded once. But the Attorney General's team is moving, and... He paused. Darren and Cynthia contacted me. Loretta's skin went cold. What did they say? Nate's eyes held hers. They want to resolve this privately. Ben barked a bitter laugh. Tara's voice was sharp. Of course they do. Loretta's hands tightened around the blanket. Privately. So the truth could disappear again. Loretta looked at Nate. Tell them no, Nate nodded. Already did. Loretta swallowed. Then what? Nate's voice softened, but only slightly. Then we go after everything. The commitment, the fraud, the property, the time they stole. Loretta stared at the key in her palm. Thomas's key. The safe, she whispered. Ben turned. What safe? Loretta looked up at them, eyes bright. My husband hid more. A basement safe. I have the key. Nate's gaze sharpened immediately. If there's more evidence, it could expand the case, especially if there are names, payments, or patterns. Ben's jaw tightened, but the house is watched. Tara leaned forward. Then we don't go alone. Loretta's voice was quiet and absolute. We go with cameras. Tara's phone lifted slightly. Ben nodded once slow. Okay. Nate stared at Loretta like he was measuring her strength. And then he said, all right, tomorrow morning. With deputies and an inventory order, Loretta's heart pounded. Tomorrow she would walk back into her house. Not as a ghost, not as a fugitive, as the owner, as the truth. And if you've made it this far, subscribe to Stories Untold. Because the safe is where the story stops being just Loretta's, it becomes everyone's. Because when they opened Thomas Hale's basement safe the next morning, they didn't just find money or old deeds. They found a ledger, names, dates, and a list of other families, other patients, who'd lost homes the same way Loretta did. And at the bottom of the page, written in Caldwell's neat handwriting, was one sentence that made Nate go silent. Briarwood Pipeline, approved. Loretta stared at the words until they blurred, because it meant she wasn't the exception. She was the survivor who came back. Where are you watching from right now? And do you want an alternate ending, where Loretta confronts Cynthia and Darren face to face in the final scene?